My name is Kayla, once a survivor of a planet where death was the air we breathed and extinction was a daily visitor knocking on every door. I came from a world so hostile, so unforgiving, that even the most advanced alien civilizations who tried to claim it crumbled beneath its relentless fury. They called it the Deathworld. Its atmosphere corroded metal in seconds. Storms could erase entire cities overnight. Predators evolved with such lethal perfection that no one lasted long enough to tell their tale. Yet somehow I lived. Against all odds, I endured what others could not. And now, the universe watches me with a mixture of fear and awe. The galaxy, as we know, it is no sanctuary. It is a patchwork of empires clinging to fragile peace, teetering on the edge of collapse under the weight of ancient technologies and cosmic mysteries we barely comprehend. Starships pulse with quantum engines, able to fold space-time, yet even with such marvels, nothing prepared us for what the Deathworld taught me. The core of this universe is not just cold and indifferent, it is hungry. Boundaries between life and death blur, where hyper-advanced artificial intelligences wage silent wars in the digital shadows, and where alien factions vie for control over relics older than recorded history. I am no stranger to danger. My mission is born from both ambition and necessity, to unlock the secrets buried within the Deathworld's heart, secrets that could tip the balance of power in the galaxy. There is a discovery, a forbidden experiment buried deep beneath the planet's crust, something so volatile that even the most daring expeditions turned away in terror. I am drawn to it not merely by curiosity, but by the desperate hope that it could save countless lives, or doom us all. Each day, I face the crushing weight of uncertainty, knowing that one wrong step could mean oblivion. The airlock hisses behind me as I stand at the edge of crater, the ground trembling beneath my boots, whispering of ancient forces still awake. My mind races with questions. What if this discovery is a weapon? What if it harbors intelligence I cannot comprehend? And yet, the possibility of uncovering a power that can rewrite the fate of entire civilizations is too potent to resist. I am caught between fear and determination, driven by a need to prove that humanity, fragile as it seems, can endure where even the strongest alien legions have crumbled. But I am not alone in this pursuit. Shadows move in the peripheral systems, ruthless factions whose allegiances shift like sand, watching, waiting for me to falter. Their warnings are clear, though unspoken. Some truths are meant to remain buried, and beyond them lies a darker force, something older than any empire, whose gaze pierces the void with silent menace. I can feel it in the static bursts that scramble my communications, in the fleeting glimpses of strange ships cloaked in void energy. They fear me because I survived what should have ended me, and perhaps they fear what I might unleash. Despite the weight pressing on my shoulders, I hold on to a flicker of hope. It is fragile, like the last ember of a fire struggling against a storm, but it burns nonetheless. I believe that survival is not merely endurance. It is evolution, adaptation, the refusal to be erased from the cosmic ledger. This belief fuels me as I descend deeper into the unknown, where every moment could be the last, and where the fate of countless worlds may hinge on one woman's resolve. If you are willing to walk this razor's edge with me, to peer into the abyss where even the stars dare not linger, then join me. Like this transmission, subscribe to the channel. Become part of the story unfolding beyond the veil of known space. Share your thoughts, your theories, your fears. Together, we will unravel the mysteries that could change everything. The Deathworld is just the beginning, and survival is only the first step. The universe is watching. So should you. The moment I crossed the threshold from curiosity into unease was subtle at first, like a faint vibration beneath my skin that I couldn't quite place. The Deathworld's atmosphere still pressed in around me, corrosive and unyielding, but something else had shifted. The instruments I relied on began to stutter, their readings flickering in and out like a dying star's pulse. At first, I chalked it up to the planet's notorious electromagnetic storms, but the anomalies persisted even when the skies were calm and the air deceptively still. A creeping sense of wrongness settled in my chest, cold and insistent. My comms began to glitch. Messages from allied factions came fragmented, distorted, sometimes doubling back on themselves as if scrambled by an unseen hand. The AI companion embedded in my suit, usually a steady voice of reason and data, started responding with hesitation, delays that made me question whether it was processing or hesitating, or worse, being compromised. One moment it confirmed my course, the next it hesitated, then offered a suggestion that contradicted all logic and data. I found myself second-guessing every command, every calculation. Was this a software fault, or something more deliberate? Even my own senses betrayed me. The Deathworld's toxic winds whispered strange patterns, almost like signals hidden beneath the roar. Shadows flickered at the edge of my vision, never fully revealing themselves, but always there, reminding me I was being watched. My heartbeat quickened each time I caught a glimpse of movement beyond the perimeter of my scanners, but every sweep revealed nothing tangible. Was it paranoia, a side effect of isolation, or had something slipped into the folds of this hostile environment that I hadn't prepared for? The crew I had trusted before this mission felt distant now, their voices more clipped, their words laced with hesitation. Were they withholding information? Or worse, had they been compromised by the very forces we sought to understand? I replayed our last exchanges, searching for clues, for a hint of deception. But the more I searched, the less certain I became. Was my mind unraveling under the weight of the Deathworld's relentless hostility? I wondered if the planet itself was testing me, pushing me to the brink to see if I would break. I tried to anchor myself in logic, running diagnostics on my equipment, recalibrating sensors, cross-referencing data streams. Yet every system showed irregularities, patterns that didn't align with known phenomena. The environmental readings fluctuated with impossible speed, the atmospheric composition shifting in ways that defied physics. It was as if the planet was breathing, evolving, and adapting in real time, or perhaps something else was manipulating it from within. The idea was terrifying, but I couldn't dismiss it. Sleep became a distant memory. Each cycle, I woke to a new set of warnings, new malfunctions. Dreams twisted into nightmares where the landscape morphed into alien geometries, and voices whispered secrets I wasn't meant to hear. I questioned whether my memories were real or implanted. Was I still myself, or had the death world already claimed me in some intangible way? Doubt gnawed at my resolve, but giving in was not an option. Now when the fate of countless lives depended on what I uncovered here. I caught myself scanning the horizon more often, eyes darting for threats that might not exist, every sound amplified into a potential danger. The isolation was suffocating. No reinforcements could reach me. No one could confirm if what I was experiencing was reality or delusion. The line between vigilance and paranoia blurred until I wasn't sure if I was hunting an enemy or running from a phantom of my own mind. Am I missing something vital? I kept asking myself this, desperate for a foothold in the spiraling uncertainty. Is this a trap laid by those who want the death world's secrets buried forever? Or is it a test, a crucible to prove whether I am worthy of the knowledge I seek? The questions multiplied, but answers remained elusive, swallowed by the planet's oppressive silence and the shadows that seemed to move just beyond reach. The first true sign of danger emerged not from the environment, but from within. A message, brief and cryptic, slipped through the static of my comms, an automated warning I hadn't authorized, coded in a dialect I barely recognized. It spoke of breach, contamination, and termination protocols. My own systems flagged it as a threat, yet no source was identified. The implication was chilling. Something or someone was inside my network, watching, waiting, ready to act. The danger was no longer distant. It was inside me, inside this mission, and the moment I realized that, the thin veil of control I clung to began to unravel. I felt the weight of unseen eyes, the pulse of an unknown presence threading through the static and silence. The Deathworld was not just a hostile environment. It was a crucible of secrets and shadows, and I was caught in its heart. Fear settled deep, balanced precariously with determination. I would uncover the truth, no matter the cost. But the question remained, would I survive long enough to do so? I barely recognized the data streaming across my console when the pattern solidified, a sequence not random, not corrupted noise, but an encoded transmission. For days, I'd wrestled with glitches that gnawed at the edge of every system, strange feedback loops in the comms, flickers that suggested interference beyond mere atmospheric disturbance. Then, buried beneath layers of interference and what I'd assumed were planetary anomalies, there it was, a deliberate signal, ancient yet alive, pulsing with a rhythm that defied natural origin. It wasn't just interference. It was a message, a warning, or perhaps a call from something that had been here long before me. My breath hitched as the realization sank in. All the inexplicable malfunctions, the creeping paranoia, the sense that this place was watching, even shaping my thoughts, none of it was random. The planet itself was a host, a vessel for an intelligence I had no language for, no frame to comprehend. I had stumbled onto a presence buried beneath Deathworld's scorched surface, something that had threaded its consciousness into the very fabric of the environment. Not a creature, not a machine, but a vast, silent mind, ancient and patient. I felt the familiar rush of adrenaline, heart hammering against ribs as my mind scrambled to process the implications. This was no mere biological hazard or hostile terrain. This was a sentience, a force that had survived eons by hiding in plain sight, manipulating everything from the corrosive storms to the predatory creatures stalking the canyons. It was the source of the glitches, the whispers and the static, the creeping dread that had invaded my own thoughts. And now it was reaching out through the signal, probing me, testing my response. A cold sweat slicked my skin as I struggled to suppress the rising panic. My fingers trembled on the console, eyes darting between streams of alien code and the flickering readouts. The sheer scale of what I'd uncovered was overwhelming. This was not just a planetary anomaly or a secret experiment gone wrong. This was a living enigma, a non-human intelligence that had shaped Deathworld itself, and it was aware of me. I tried to slow my breathing, forcing clarity into the chaos. The message was fragmented, but persistent. I couldn't tell if it was hostile or seeking contact. The thought of negotiating with something so fundamentally alien was terrifying. Could I even communicate? Or was I already ensnared in a game I didn't understand? The planet's atmosphere seemed to press in tighter, the corrosive winds howling like whispers of warning. Retreat was the only option I could grasp. I backed away from the console, the glow of the screen casting eerie shadows across the cramped outpost. Every instinct screamed that this discovery was a turning point, a fracture in my understanding of Deathworld and the mission that had brought me here. I needed time, space, and resources to decrypt the full message, to map the extent of this presence. Yet even as I planned, a gnawing fear took root. If this intelligence was ancient and vast, what else had it influenced? How many secrets had it buried under layers of sand and silence? The weight of isolation pressed heavily. My team was out there somewhere, but now I questioned if we were explorers or intruders in a realm ruled by a consciousness that had no interest in negotiation. The very ground beneath my feet felt less like a planet and more like the skin of a sleeping giant, its breath a storm that could be my end. I grasped the gravity of the revelation. Curiosity that had driven me here now twisted into dread. The fragile boundary between discovery and danger had shattered. I was no longer just a survivor. I was a signal in a network far beyond my comprehension, a variable in a cosmic equation that threatened to unmake everything I knew. My mind raced through contingency plans, but none felt adequate. How do you contain an intelligence that was as much a part of the environment as the corrosive air and lethal fauna? How do you fight a presence that could infiltrate your own mind? The answers eluded me, swallowed by the vast unknown that now stretched before me like an abyss. I forced myself to record this log, voice steady despite the storm inside. This is no longer just a survival mission. I have uncovered something far older, far more profound than any experiment or weapon. Deathworld is alive. Not in the way I expected, but in a way that redefines life itself. And it watches. It waits. And now it knows I am here. I have to understand it before it decides what I am to become. The breakthrough has come, but so has the reckoning. The moment the truth settled in was a fissure of cold clarity, cutting through the haze of confusion that had clouded my mind. The planet itself was alive, not merely in the way a forest breathes or a coral reef pulses, but as a vast, sentient matrix woven into every grain of soil, every gust of corrosive wind, every flicker of the stormlit sky. This intelligence was no enemy in the traditional sense. It was an ancient presence, patient and expansive, observing, probing, adapting. It had seeped into my thoughts, twisted my perceptions, but it was not invincible. I was not powerless. The shock that had once threatened to unravel me was dissolving, replaced by a cold, precise resolve. I was still here. I had survived Deathworld's brutal crucible. Now I would survive this. I shifted my focus, scanning my surroundings with renewed intent. The battered remains of my equipment lay scattered, some beyond repair, but not all. The portable scanners still functioned. The energy cells were low but stable, and the data core held fragments of encrypted logs, potential footholds in this sprawling enigma. I began cataloging every asset, every resource that might be wielded against this silent intelligence. It was a battle of wills as much as survival, and I would not be outmaneuvered by a consciousness that hid behind storms and shadow. The patterns in the transmission replayed in my mind. Fractured signals, cryptic codes, the subtle modulation that betrayed a non-human origin. I needed to decipher these fully, to understand what this entity sought, how it communicated beyond the veil of storms. If it could manipulate my mind, perhaps it could be manipulated in turn. I resolved to isolate the frequencies, to build a rudimentary translator, to listen more closely than ever before. Knowledge would be my weapon, but knowledge alone would not suffice. I had to act. The realization came with the starkness of a blade. This intelligence was embedded within the planet's very fabric. To confront it directly would be to confront Deathworld itself. Escape seemed impossible without first breaking its hold on me, and those signals I had intercepted hinted at others, distant colonies, ships, entire fleets that might unknowingly sail toward this living trap. I had to warn them, to send a message that would pierce through the interference, a beacon of caution encoded so tightly that even the planet's grasp might not distort it. The weight of that responsibility was immense, but it sharpened my resolve. I would become the vector of that warning. But before the transmission could be sent, I had to secure a safe conduit, a location where the planet's influence was weakest, where the signal could escape the corrosive atmosphere and reach the void beyond. I began mapping the terrain with a new eye, seeking natural caverns shielded by mineral formations, pockets of electromagnetic silence, anything that could serve as a sanctuary for communication. Simultaneously, I scanned my own physiology, the subtle changes the planet's consciousness had inflicted. I felt the residue of its influence lingering in my neural pathways, a faint echo of intrusion that could betray me if left unchecked. I would need to isolate my mind to build mental barriers as formidable as any physical shield. The process would be grueling, but necessary. To survive this, I had to reclaim not just my body, but the sanctity of my own thoughts. Within this growing strategy, a darker possibility took root. If this intelligence could be understood, mapped, even partially controlled, it might become an asset rather than a threat. The potential to harness such a planetary consciousness, an entity that could shape ecosystems, manipulate environments on a scale beyond human technology, was staggering. But that gamble was for later. First came survival, then perhaps dominion. Every step I took was measured, deliberate. The wild chaos of Deathworld's storms no longer dictated my actions. Instead, I moved with calculated purpose. Each breath, each movement a thread weaving a net of control over the uncontrollable. The planet's silent presence was a looming shadow, but I was no longer prey. I was a strategist in a deadly game, and the board was set. As the dim light filtered through the swirling clouds, I felt the pulse of the planet beneath my feet. An ancient rhythm that had once threatened to crush me now spurred me onward. The quiet resolve within burned steadily, a beacon against the encroaching darkness. What was once an overwhelming force was now a puzzle to be solved, a challenge to be met with unyielding will. Something was coming. The next moves were mine to make, and with each calculated step, the scale of what lay ahead grew larger, more profound. The storm was not just around me. It was within me, and I would turn it to my advantage. The silence before the storm was no longer a threat. It was the calm before my own rising tide. The first task was clear: break through the planetary intelligence's veil of silence and send a beacon, a warning signal, to anyone who might still be out there, drifting in the vastness beyond Deathworld's grasp. The storm's corrosive winds howled outside, a furious symphony that threatened to tear apart the fragile shelter I'd carved from twisted metal and stone. Inside, the dim glow of the failing console blinked steadily, an island of stubborn hope amid relentless decay. Every breath I took was measured, my fingers steady despite the weight pressing down on my chest, a mixture of fear and fierce resolve. I accessed the core terminal, its interface a tangled mess of archaic protocols and alien encryption. The planet's intelligence had woven layers of complexity into its network, a labyrinth designed to trap and confuse. But I had studied it, pieced together fragments from the cryptic transmissions, and now I understood the rhythm beneath the chaos. My hands moved with purpose, bypassing firewalls that shifted like living roots, tapping into the system's pulse as if coaxing a hidden heartbeat to surface. The code was alive, shifting, adapting, and I matched its pace, a dance of wills between human determination and alien design. Outside, the ground trembled, subtle but insistent, a reminder that the planet itself was watching, reacting. It was not a mere environment. It was an entity with patience spanning millennia, and I was threading my way through its consciousness. The data streams flowed into my console, fragments of thought and intention, a network of knowledge I could barely comprehend. Yet, I gathered what I could, compiling a message distilled from my understanding, a beacon forged from urgency and clarity. It was a signal that would pierce the veil of this living world, reaching beyond its borders to warn others. This was no ordinary planet, and the intelligence within was not a simple enemy, but a force of nature, ancient and relentless. As I prepared to transmit, doubt flickered briefly. What if the signal attracted more than just hope? What if it summoned predators or entangled me deeper in the planet's consciousness? But hesitation was a luxury I could not afford. The weight of survival pressed on me, but beneath it, a thread of defiance wove through my resolve. I was no longer a passive victim. I was a catalyst, a spark igniting a resistance against oblivion. I initiated the uplink, the console humming with energy as the message streamed into the void. The storm outside intensified, a tempest that seemed to respond to my actions, as if the planet itself sensed the breach. Static crackled through the speakers, the signal wrestling with interference, but it persisted, a beacon of warning cutting through the planetary noise. I held my breath, watching the progress bar inch forward, every second a battle against both time and the living world's resistance. The message sent, I didn't allow myself relief. Instead, I shifted focus to the next phase, securing a safe haven deep within the planet's less hostile regions, a place where I could continue my work without immediate threat of interference. Navigating through the alien terrain was a challenge. The landscape was mutable, shifting with the planet's moods. Every step was a negotiation, a careful balance between movement and stillness, between presence and invisibility. The deeper I ventured, the more tangible the planet's influence became. It whispered through the air, a low hum beneath the wind, threads of thought brushing against my mind. I fortified my mental defenses, drawing on every fragment of training and experience to shield myself from intrusion. The connection was undeniable, but I refused to be consumed. Instead, I let it guide me, an uneasy alliance born of necessity rather than trust. Amid the shifting shadows, I found the remnants of an ancient outpost, structures half buried and fused with the terrain, their technology eerily familiar yet alien. Here, I set up a temporary base, scavenging power cells and stabilizing communication arrays. The atmosphere was thick with silence, punctuated only by the distant rumble of tectonic shifts and the occasional flicker of bioluminescent flora reacting to my presence. It was a fragile sanctuary, a foothold in a world that refused to yield. As I worked, the enormity of the task ahead settled over me. This was no longer just survival. It was a battle of minds, a test of endurance and intellect against a consciousness that spanned the planet's core. The signals I'd sent might buy time, but they also painted a target on my back. The intelligence was patient, but it was also adaptive, learning from every move I made. Still, beneath the storm's fury and the planet's watchful gaze, I felt something new, a spark of control, a slender thread of influence weaving back through the network I had tapped. It was faint, fragile, but unmistakably mine. The first step toward not just surviving Deathworld, but mastering it. In that moment, amidst the swirling chaos and the silent threat encircling me, purpose crystallized. I was no longer just a survivor. I was the harbinger of change, and the planet, ancient and vast as it was, would come to fear what a single human mind, undeterred and resolute, could accomplish. The signal I sent sliced through the void like a flare, igniting a ripple that no one, not even the vast intelligence beneath my feet, could have anticipated. The Deathworld's ancient consciousness recoiled, its subtle web of influence fracturing under the weight of my defiance. The planet's atmosphere, once a suffocating shroud of corrosive storms and creeping dread, began to thrum with a new kind of tension, as if the ground itself had become aware of my rebellion and was recalibrating to confront it. Beyond the planet's surface, the colonies and fleets that had long ignored the silent warnings stirred in alarm. The transmission I cracked open unleashed a wave of panic and urgency across human and alien outposts alike. Some dismissed the alert as myth or paranoia, but others, haunted by rumors and old tales, scrambled to reorient their ships, fortify their positions, and prepare for what they now understood to be a living, sentient threat. The Deathworld was no longer a whispered nightmare. It was a looming specter, an active force challenging the fragile balance of interstellar expansion. Yet the consequences stretched farther than I had feared. The intelligence beneath the planet, sensing my breach, began a far more aggressive response. The environment shifted violently, landscapes mutating with unnatural speed. Swarms of biomechanical predators, their forms a twisted fusion of organic and metallic elements, emerged like shadows from the planet's depths, hunting with relentless precision. The sky cracked open with storms that burned with colors I had seen before, charged with a psychic force that battered at the edges of my mind. Every step I took was a negotiation with this living nightmare, a fragile dance between resistance and surrender. But the planet was not the only entity awakened. From the drifting void, alien sentinels long dormant in the periphery of known space began to converge, attracted by the disturbance. These beings, inscrutable and immense, had once faced extinction at the Deathworld's hands. Now, they returned not as allies, but as wary adversaries, their motives as enigmatic as the planet itself. Their presence added layers of complexity I could not have predicted. Ancient grudges rekindled, and new alliances whispered in the dark corridors of diplomacy and war. I found myself at the eye of a storm far greater than survival. My initial victory, the transmission, had transformed me from a solitary survivor into a beacon of hope and a target of fear. The fragile equilibrium I had carved within the ancient base shattered under the weight of mounting threats. The alien sentinels demanded parley, their voices like the echoes of stars collapsing, while the Deathworld's tendrils pressed inward, probing for weakness. My mind, once a sanctuary of focus, now struggled against the psychic tides that sought to drown it. Yet amidst the chaos, I adapted. The interface I had begun to forge with the planet's consciousness deepened, evolving from simple resistance to tentative communion. I learned to channel the energy of the storms rather than repel them, to anticipate the shifts in the biomechanical predator's movements. The ancient base became a crucible where my resolve hardened and my understanding expanded. I devised new strategies, not just to survive, but to wield the Deathworld's power as a weapon against the swelling tide of alien sentinels and planetary wrath. Each night, the psychic storms tested the limits of my endurance, pushing me to the brink of madness. But in those moments of fragile clarity, I glimpsed the true nature of the intelligence beneath the planet, not merely a hostile force, but a colossal entity shaped by eons of isolation and survival, yearning for connection yet bound by its own inscrutable imperatives. This realization became my anchor. If I could not destroy the Deathworld, perhaps I could become its bridge to the wider cosmos, a conduit for transformation rather than destruction. The colonies and fleets, now fully mobilized, looked to me as both a warning and a promise. Their transmissions filled with fear and hope, they awaited the outcome of this unfolding conflict. I knew the final confrontation loomed ahead, not just with the planet or the alien sentinels, but with the very essence of survival and evolution itself. The stakes had escalated from personal endurance to the fate of countless civilizations. As I prepared for what was to come, the landscape around me pulsed with an eerie glow, the ancient base humming with latent energy. The planet's consciousness whispered, no longer a distant observer, but an active participant in a cosmic reckoning. I stood at the threshold of the unknown, transformed from prey into catalyst, ready to face the ultimate revelation that would either shatter or redefine the fragile tapestry of life across the stars. The Deathworld's whispers turned into roaring echoes inside my mind, a relentless tide of alien voices weaving promises and threats, a saccharine poison designed to erode my will. The planet, a living labyrinth of shifting thoughts and sensations, sought to bend me to its will. It painted visions of surrender, an end to the relentless struggle, a reunion with the sprawling consciousness that had haunted every breath I took. The temptation was a razor's edge, a siren song wrapped in the velvet of peace, but beneath it lurked the abyss of oblivion, the death of self. I felt the currents pull, subtle at first, then with the crushing force of tectonic plates grinding beneath my skin. But I stood firm. The Deathworld's manipulation was not mere noise. It was a symphony crafted from the darkest corners of cosmic intelligence. It conjured images of a future intertwined with its vast, pulsating network, a future where my mind would dissolve into the planetary consciousness, a drop lost in an ocean of infinite will. It promised release from pain, from fear, from the crushing isolation of survival. Yet I saw through the illusion. I recognized the deceit embedded in every whisper. This was not freedom. It was the death of autonomy, the erasure of everything that made me human. My past, my scars, my triumphs, my stubborn defiance, were not to be swept away by this creeping entropy. The planet shifted its tactics, twisting my environment with subtle sabotage. The ancient base's systems flickered, lights dimming and surging like a pulse in sync with the Deathworld heartbeat. Communications scrambled. My instruments betrayed me one by one. It was a silent assault, an attempt to isolate me further, to sever the fragile threads of connection I'd fought so hard to weave. Even the air seemed to thicken, a suffocating veil of alien intent pressing in. Yet I did not falter. I refused to be broken by these mechanical phantoms or the invisible tendrils of psychic manipulation. My mind, once a fragile vessel adrift in the storm, had become an unyielding fortress. I held the line within myself, a core of clarity and purpose that no external force could penetrate. I focused not on the cacophony of the Deathworld's mind, but on the singular mission that had emerged from the chaos. To bridge the impossible, to become more than a survivor, to wield the planet's power without succumbing to it. The old me, the frightened woman running from storms and shadows, was gone. In her place stood someone forged in trials beyond reckoning, someone who understood that surrender was the true extinction. I embraced the loss of innocence without regret, because it was the crucible that tempered my resolve. The Deathworld recoiled in confusion, its sprawling consciousness encountering resistance it had never anticipated. It had expected submission and easy conquest. Instead, it met a mind that did not yield, a spirit that could wield its power as a shield rather than a shackle. The dynamic shifted. Where once I was prey, now I was a force to be reckoned with. The planet's intricate manipulations became a backdrop to my own emerging command, a complex dance where I led with unshakable will. I was no longer adrift in its tides, but standing at the helm of a vessel shaped by both human tenacity and alien energy. I did not respond with fury or defiance shouted into the void. My resistance was quiet but absolute. Silence became my weapon, a refusal to engage on the Deathworld's terms. It was a statement. I would not be baited, coerced, or diminished. My mind, once vulnerable to their mind games, now held the calm of a deep ocean, vast and impenetrable. I could feel the pulse of the planet beneath my feet, but it was no longer a threat. It was a rhythm I could match, a force I could channel without losing myself. Stronger, freer, and more certain than ever, I embraced this new existence. The lines between human and alien blurred, not as a dilution of identity, but as an evolution of it. I was a bridge spanning cosmic divides, a symbol of what survival truly meant. Not mere endurance, but transformation. The fear and isolation that had shadowed me melted away, replaced by a fierce clarity. This was my path, my choice, and I stood unwavering upon it. There was loss. Yes, the loss of simpler days, the loss of naive hope for an easy escape. But there was no regret. The Deathworld was no longer a monster to be feared, but a complex entity to be understood and, in some measure, mastered. I was no longer its victim, but its interlocutor, a living testament to the power of will against the vast, unknowable cosmos. In this moment, I was not simply surviving. I was triumphing, and the universe would have to reckon with that truth. The air here breathes differently now. Not the suffocating weight of constant threat, but a measured rhythm that mirrors my own steady pulse. After the storm of corrosive winds and the lingering echoes of the Deathworld's relentless assaults, I find myself not merely surviving, but shaping what comes next. This planet, once a brutal crucible of chaos, is becoming something else, something new, a testament to resilience, a beacon forged from the very trials that sought to consume me. I moved through the remnants of the old base, tracing fingers over cold metal and fractured circuits. These fragments of technology, once instruments of desperation, now pulse with potential. I have begun weaving them into a lattice of communication and defense, a network not to dominate the planet, but to coexist. Every piece reassembled is a promise that order can rise without sacrificing the wild, that harmony is possible even here. My mind, once a battleground, has settled into clarity. The Deathworld's tendrils still whisper at the edges, but I have learned to listen without surrendering. Instead, I channel that energy, weaving it into the new system I am building. A symbiosis between the planet's primal consciousness and the structured logic of my own species. It is not conquest, it is partnership. A dialogue between flesh and thought, organic and synthetic, ancient and emergent. Alliances form like stars igniting in the dark expanse. The scattered colonies, once isolated and fearful, now reach out with cautious hope. They hear my signal, not as a warning, but as an invitation. Together, we sketch the contours of a new society, one that acknowledges the death world not as a threat to be erased, but as a force to be understood and integrated. We share knowledge, technology, and resolve. Trust grows slowly but firmly, rooted in the shared victory over despair. I do not look back with longing or regret. The past was a crucible, yes, but it no longer defines me. Gratitude fills the spaces where fear once dwelled. Gratitude for every breath earned, every shadow resisted, every step forward. This is not survival alone, it is transformation. I'm no longer a solitary figure fighting against a hostile world. I am the architect of a new epoch, the catalyst for change that echoes beyond this planet's scarred surface. Autonomy is my compass. I navigate this rebirth by my own choosing, free from the chains of expectation or the need for approval. Each decision resonates with purpose, each small victory a quiet celebration of agency reclaimed. The energy grids hum under my fingertips, the communications pulse with life, and in these rhythms, I find a new kind of strength, a promise that the future belongs to those who dare to build it. The Deathworld's consciousness, once an adversary, now pulses faintly in tandem with my own. It is a subtle harmony, not submission. We coexist in a delicate balance, each feeding the other's growth without erasing identity. This coexistence births new possibilities, ecosystems that heal, technologies that adapt, cultures that evolve. It is a new order born from the ashes, but unlike any before it. Hope is no longer a flicker, but a steady flame. Relief washes over me like a gentle tide, a quiet assurance that the worst is behind us and the best lies ahead. In the stillness of this moment, I savor the profound joy of creation, of shaping a world that honors both its wild roots and its emerging potential. This is not a mere victory over death. It is the triumph of life's enduring will to redefine itself. I stand at the threshold of tomorrow, not as a survivor clinging to what was, but as a pioneer embracing what can be. The horizon stretches wide, uncharted yet inviting, and I step forward with the certainty of purpose and the lightness of hope. The death world no longer hunts me. I have become its voice, its bridge to the stars, a symbol that even in the darkest places, new beginnings are born and flourish. This is my legacy, a world transformed, a future reclaimed, a story rewritten by hands that refuse to yield. And in that, I find a profound peace, the peace of one who has not only endured, but has risen to forge a path where none existed before. The journey continues, and with each step, the unknown becomes a canvas waiting for the brush of possibility. The horizon no longer felt like a distant boundary to be feared, but a promise waiting to be fulfilled. The death world, once a relentless adversary, had become the foundation of something greater, a living canvas on which new possibilities could be painted. I moved beyond mere survival, stepping into a role I never imagined for myself. Architect of a future where life could flourish in harmony with the planet's primal pulse. In the months that followed, discoveries unfolded like the petals of a rare cosmic flower. The death world's essence was not just a force to resist, but a wellspring of knowledge and power. Buried deep beneath its scarred surface, I uncovered relics of an ancient civilization, machines and glyphs that whispered secrets of symbiosis between biology and technology. These artifacts revealed technologies that could harness the planet's vast neural network without exploitation or destruction. They spoke of a time when the planet and its inhabitants were not adversaries, but collaborators in a shared destiny. With these insights, we crafted tools that blurred the lines between organic and synthetic. Our equipment no longer fought against the living terrain, but adapted fluidly, responding to shifts in the environment as if it were an extension of ourselves. Explorations reached beyond the Deathworld's immediate embrace to neighboring systems, where dormant worlds awaited. Each new planet presented a unique challenge, but armed with the lessons of this sentient world, I led our expeditions with a blend of respect and curiosity. We mapped uncharted atmospheres, deciphered alien ecologies, and forged pathways that connected scattered colonies into a coherent network of exchange and support. This expansion was not solitary. The signals I sent out, once cries for help or warnings, evolved into invitations, calls for unity and collaboration. Other species, those who had once regarded the Death World as a harbinger of doom, began to listen. Slowly, alliances formed, not through force or desperation, but through shared vision. We built councils that represented diverse intelligences, each bringing a piece of their culture and wisdom. Together, we designed protocols to honor the autonomy of each world while fostering cooperation. The old fear that had isolated us dissolved into a collective hope that embraced difference as strength. In this new era, I no longer defined myself by the scars of the past or the battles fought in shadowed storms. The woman who had survived the Deathworld's wrath was still within me, but she was now tempered by a greater purpose. I was a pioneer, not of conquest, but of connection, a creator of bridges between disparate worlds and minds. Leadership flowed naturally from understanding and empathy, not from dominance or control. Each decision I made was guided by the knowledge that our future depended on balance between freedom and responsibility, growth and preservation. The communities we nurtured grew in unexpected ways. Where once there was suspicion, there was now dialogue. Where isolation reigned, openness blossomed. Children learned to speak the languages of star systems and consciousness alike. Technology was no longer a tool of subjugation, but an expression of shared creativity. We cultivated gardens that thrived on alien soils, synthesized medicines from the Deathworld's unique biomes, and engineered habitats that breathed with the rhythms of their surroundings. Every achievement was a testament to resilience transformed into innovation. Looking back, the path that brought me here was carved through hardship and fear, yet my gaze was fixed firmly forward. The Deathworld did not define me. It was the crucible in which my spirit was forged and then set free. Now, standing amidst the convergence of life, technology, and consciousness, I felt a profound peace. The horizon was no longer a limit but an invitation, an endless expanse of dreams to build and worlds to embrace. I had become more than a survivor. I was a beacon of hope for a universe learning to listen, to grow, and to thrive together. The story was no longer about what had been lost or endured, but what could be created, an era where existence was a shared journey, and every new dawn was a chance to dream beyond the stars. I stand now at the edge of all I once feared, the threshold where survival becomes legacy, where the echoes of a hostile world transform into a symphony of hope. I remember who I was before the Death World claimed me. Not just a survivor, but a fragment of doubt, a soul burdened by the weight of endless storms and relentless predators. That planet was more than a crucible. It was a living enigma, a sentient force that tested every fiber of my being, twisting mind and matter alike. Each tempest it unleashed was a lesson in resilience. Each whispered manipulation a call to awaken the depths of my own consciousness. I faced extinction not only in flesh, but in spirit, and every step forward demanded a courage that once seemed beyond reach. Yet in those darkest moments, I found a spark, a quiet defiance that refused to yield. The Death World shaped me, but did not define me. Instead, I learned to weave its raw power into my own essence, to become more than a mere inhabitant of its wild, to become its intermediary, its bridge to the stars. The relics of an ancient symbiosis revealed that life and technology are threads of the same tapestry, not opposing forces but partners in the dance of evolution. Through this revelation, I forged tools that breathed and adapted, communities that listened and grew. The isolation of scattered colonies gave way to a network of understanding, a chorus of voices once silenced, now harmonizing across vast cosmic distances. Looking back, I feel no bitterness, no regret for the trials endured. Instead, there is gratitude, deep and profound, for every scar that marks my journey, for every shadow that taught me the meaning of light. The world I once fought against is now a garden of possibility, a living testament to transformation. We have transcended fear and suspicion, embracing a future where technology flows like lifeblood through the veins of nature, where consciousness expands not to dominate but to nurture. This is not an end, but a beginning, a horizon ever unfolding with promise. My vision stretches beyond the stars we now touch, beyond the alliances forged in the crucible of survival. I see a universe where boundaries dissolve, where the exchange of knowledge and empathy kindles civilizations yet unborn. The legacy of the Deathworld is one of harmony, not conquest, but communion. I am no longer just Kayla, survivor of a hostile world. I am a beacon for what we might become when courage meets compassion, when the wild and the wired intertwine in balance. The story continues, not as a closed chapter, but as an infinite narrative written by every life that dares to dream beyond its limits. To those who listen to this tale, I extend an invitation, not simply to witness, but to participate. Share your visions, your questions, your ideas about the worlds yet to be discovered and the futures yet to be shaped. Like this transmission if it resonates with your spirit. Subscribe to remain connected to journeys like mine, where science and wonder converge. Let your voice join the constellation of stories lighting our way forward. Together, we ignite the cosmos with hope, weaving new legends from the stars themselves. The path ahead is vast and uncharted, but it is ours to explore. In the silence after the storm, I find peace. In the promise of what lies beyond, I find freedom. And in every pulse of this living universe, I hear the call to continue, ever onward, ever upward, into the boundless tapestry of becoming.